Healing. It plays a huge part in thousands of games. Whether you're using items, eating food, or playing as a special character, you need those little green numbers to stay alive. But do we really? I was trained in the art of dodging, so I wanted to put my skills to the test by seeing if we could beat all of Genshin without healing. But before we get into the rules, let me just give a quick shout out to our new partners, Supps. Use code FEET for 10% off all of your energy drinks, snacks, soups, waifu cups, and more over at Supps. You can try out tons of different flavors that are all keto friendly, sugar free, and have caffeine free variants. You can also order the free samples that come with 3 flavors for you to try out. You can learn more about Supps by clicking on the links in the description. It's my birthday, so you have to. Now let's get back to the video. Here are the rules. We cannot heal. Go figure. This includes abilities that heal, healing food, and the Statue of the Seven. If a character dies, they are dead. Gone. Never coming back.
Bye-bye. See you later.
And lastly, we will be free to play only for this account. This is going to be a war, and there will be a lot of deaths. Now let's see if we can beat Genshin Impact without healing.
You are my special.
We start our journey at the statue. Once we obtained our animo powers, we had to defeat some pyro slimes. Well, this may not seem like a big deal, but just remember, this damage is permanent. The scars will remain and tell a story of how this game tried to break us, but it will fail. Come on! I'll be honest, I had no idea what I was doing here, but this did serve as a reminder to turn off the healing from the Statue of the Seven. This was actually a very tactical drowning, okay? Speedrunners use this strategy all the time. Next, we level up our Traveler, and something weird happened. Our health went back up to full. Because of how I wrote this, we can logically conclude that leveling up our Traveler caused this. But at that time, I didn't think that was the reason, because it happened a whole 30 seconds later. I did quickly learn about this situation later in the run, and I did find a way to work around this issue. But I will say this right now, this did not matter. After that strange occurrence, we entered the forest and obtained our secret weapon.
My secret weapon! Let's go!
Once we shot and sucked some hilichurls, we head into Mondstadt to unlock the key element of this challenge, wishes. We had 2 choices for our first 10 pool, Noelle banner or standard banner. I went with Noelle here because 1, it actually guarantees a character, and 2, because she has a shield. Thankfully, we made the right choice because we got a Noelle and a Beto. Our first obstacle in this journey was Amber's Temple. I chose to remove everyone else in the party here because I did not want them to take any unnecessary damage since we have access to a trial Amber here. One thing you'll notice throughout this playthrough was that I took advantage of these trial characters. If this red text bubble was next to a character, they worked like a dog. Oh, and by the way, in the event that I mess up and heal a character on accident, that's a 10 pool. And don't worry, if an accident was made, we just, had methods to fix that issue.
Oh my god!
Next was Kaya's domain. The same strategy I used for Amber's Temple was used here, but since I'm ballsy and I'm a stud, I chose to jump over the spikes rather than use Kaya to ice bridge. Yeah, we're putting on our gaming caps for this run. As a reward for our heroic display, we obtained a Kaya, who I immediately put onto the team and leveled up. Additionally, I also replaced our Traveler with Beto. When we reached AR7, we received 800 gems from the VGA awards and made some wishes. Or no way. No way. Wow. Out of all the 5 stars we could have got in this run, this was literally the worst one. Chi-Chi has 2 healing abilities, so those are out of the question, meaning she can only hit enemies with her stick. And getting Bennett was actually not as good as some people would think. I'll go into more details about why later on. Additionally, we received a Sucrose from Character Banner, which is actually very good for us. Our last obstacle in Act 1 is Lisa's Temple. I tried to do the skip in the beginning, but I messed up and hurt my entire team, so I just took the road more traveled by. Following the end of the domain, we are given Elisa and told to get our money up. But more importantly, I chose to add an additional rule to this challenge. There were two stipulations I thought to add. The first was no shields, and the other was limiting our party size. In the end, I chose to go with the party size reduction because I wanted all characters that we obtain in this journey to have the same opportunity to shine. That's right, I don't discriminate. So until we beat Leeway, we are limited to having 2 people in our party. And once Leeway's over, we'll increase that to 3, which means that for now, we're gonna be running duos. And I mean, that's not a big deal. We're like, what, 1/20th of our way done? This will be easy.
Before setting off for the rest of the challenge,
Our first duo is the team of Bennett and Kaya. There's 3 elements we have to use for the story: Pyro, Animo, and Electro. So I knew I didn't want to use Amber or Lisa. I chose these 2 because we couldn't ascend Kaya and we also could not use Bennett Burst. So I figured if we were to lose some characters, these were the most expendable. For our first bit of grinding, I made the risky decision to go to Dragon Spine. This was a ballsy move to make, since we could very easily take some unnecessary damage, but I chose to do this because this is what I always do in these challenges, and I was confident in my abilities. I wasn't afraid of catching a cold. Do they know who I am? I take it back, chill, get it, stop, I was AFK. Since our Kaya took a lot of damage, I chose to replace him with Beto, which was not a good decision. Electro and Pyro are both 2 very dangerous elements for us. Burning and Electrocharged are reactions that both deal damage to us and are very easy to activate in the open world. And in a run like this, even the smallest bits of damage can matter. Once we reached AR-10, we got a 10 pull and received a Kale, which was actually not good for us. Since there is a guaranteed Kale that we can get later on, this means we lost out on having another character. As we kept grinding, I began to notice that for some reason, my characters were still getting health back. And then I realized, oh, leveling characters resets their health. So I added a new rule to prevent this. If a character gets hit, we cannot level them up. So this level 9 Sucrose is staying at level 9, and that is the last added rule for this challenge. And as I was trying to bring my Kaya back down to low health, I completely forgot that Frostbite stays on you even when you teleport, resulting in the first death of our run, Kaya. Huh. Okay. Kaya's replacement was Chi-Chi, since she was the next best expendable option. At 3 hours and 40 minutes, I chose to ascend to Amber, then we came across Kaya's puzzle. We need Cryo for this, but since we can't use Chi-Chi's abilities, and Kaya is still gone, we brought out Animo Traveler for the swirls to continue that quest. When it came time for Act 2, I swapped out Beto for Amber since she was barely holding on, and I felt confident that we could beat the eye without taking damage. And I was correct, although it could have gone very poorly for us because it was doing that one move. You know the move, the one that hits you unless you fly up into the air and hit it. Yeah, that one. If we got hit there, our Amber Ascension would have been pointless. Next was the Fatui hideout, but do you see that? Mush, Diluc, mush! Afterwards, we had the Ruin Guard. This was a little scary. If I had to put it on the FNAF scale of scariness, I'd give it a Nightmare Foxy. If we got hit, that character was dead, but I knew what I was doing, so I was confident putting these 2 up to the task. Lastly, in Act 2, was the domain holding the final tier. This part was horrifying for one reason. In order for us to kill this mandatory enemy, we had to hit this explosive barrel, meaning we were guaranteed to take damage.
Oh no!
This would result in both of our characters being put to around 500 HP. Additionally, we encountered one of the most annoying enemies throughout this entire run, Electro Slimes. They are annoying because just being near them does damage to us, and since we have 2 melee characters, we have no choice but to take the shock, leaving our Beto with 79 HP when we finished Act 2. Okay, 4-star, please. Please, character. Alright. Don't be sucrose. We'll take it. This was also not a good summon for us, since we can get a Lynette for free by just hitting AR-25. Before starting Act 3, we ascend Noelle and Lynette, then make our way over to the winery. We were flirting with death in this part of the story. If something hit us, we would die, no doubt about it. So whenever we saw the dirty bubble, we had to book it. Miraculously, we did manage to squeak out the victory here without getting touched. As we prepared to enter Dabalin's court, we were stopped by some Hilichurls. Here, I made a mistake and used Chi-Chi's skill to heal, and since she was already one hit, I felt that the best course of action was to just let death take over. So now we had a Beto with 80 HP being forced to fight basically a full health Biggie Churl with a shield. Normally this would be a pretty terrifying situation, but I'm different. This is not my first time fighting these enemies without a pyro character. All throughout my experiences, I've learned that the key to defeating these guys is to run away. Whenever you're far away from this enemy, they will always, and I mean always, choose to do this charge attack. This move is our key to victory. We can easily dodge the attack and get some free hits on his back without wasting time trying to hit his shield. And slowly but surely, our plan worked here. Beto was still holding on with 79 HP. To replace Chi-Chi, I chose to use Lynette since Bennett was still one hit and Lynette was yet another character who could not use their ability. Now it was time for the final boss of Mondstadt, Dvalin. This fight could seem a little underwhelming to some since there was a god-sized elephant in the room, but I don't need to use a femboy for something like this. Have you read my description? I'm the Michael Jordan of Genshin Impact. That's not a title, that's a name. We were pretty lucky with this fight because he decided to do his attack with the longest animation, so we had plenty of time to damage his paw. However, we were not able to one-phase his horn once we reached the top. And since we didn't defeat him here, we were put into a pretty tight spot. Because if you do not one-phase Storm Terror, he will do his
Celestinum Finale Termini.
This move constantly damages the floor, but thankfully, Lynette was fast enough to glide over, and we didn't take any damage for the rest of the battle. Following 6 hours of unrelenting gameplay, we beat Mondstadt and were rewarded with a Rosaria and a Barbara. Twinsies! But we've still got a long road ahead of us. We have to go from AR-18 to AR-23. And let me tell you, this was a brutal, blood-covered road. This challenge is truly the most unnerving challenge out there, because it feels like literally everything is out to get you.
What was that?
Enemies, puzzles, and even chests are not safe places. This challenge has really made me paranoid to the point where even on my main account, I still get a sense of dread whenever I take damage. And this challenge just became even more difficult because we lost our Beto to Electrocharged and Lynette to a Hydro Slime. No! So now it's time for Rosaria to show up. After leveling her up to 40 and equipping her with attack and HP artifacts, which, by the way, is basically everyone's build in the challenge, so you don't have to ask, unless you want to help the video out. We got another 4-star wish, and started the Spiral Abyss. So here's the thing, when you start the Abyss, your character's health goes back up to full, and when you leave the Abyss, your character still has the same health they had going into it. Because of that, I felt the Abyss was fine in this challenge as long as I didn't heal inside of it. And for those wondering about Noelle, I literally only used her shield, swapped back to Rosaria, which did not result in any healing. As a reward for finishing the first floor, we got 2 wishes. Earlier, I was wishing on Navia banner because of the characters, but since I already had 2 of them, I decided to start wishing on standard banner because we had a higher chance of getting a character we didn't already have. Of course that didn't happen here, but it's the idea that matters. After Rosaria cleared the Abyss, we made our way over to the Wolf Den to start Razor's quest. I mainly wanted to include this just to continue the narrative that I will be using trial characters when given the opportunity. You can boo me, but look at my situation. Rosaria's abilities cannot hurt him, and poor Bennett is literally 1 HP. You can't even see his health, and don't you lie to me, I know you can't see his health. After beating the wolf, we began Diluc's quest. This story actually does have enemies for our normal team to fight, but it's just Hilly Churls, so we lucked out here. The domain and final group of enemies in this quest both gave us a trial Diluc to use, so say it with me now. Mush Diluc, mush! With that out of the way, we made another wish. Character we don't have, please. Yes! Yes! Perfect. I was pretty happy about this because it gave us another crowd character and I've never used her before. But I know how Fontaine characters work. I knew that there was something in her abilities that had to either damage her or heal herself. So I decided to do what no Genshin player has ever dared to do. Her skill is all clear, but her burst does heal, so that's another one added to the list. Her first duo partner was Bennett. Poor Bennett, who was just one bad cough away from dying. Oh. Our next team was Charlotte and Noelle, and as I mentioned earlier, Noelle can be used in this challenge. We just have to be extra careful. We can't use any of her attacks when the shield is up, so once we press E, we have to swap ASAP as possible. After bringing Noelle up to level 40, we just now started the Leeway Archon quest at 9.5 hours. First up is Mooncarver, and this was actually not as free as it normally is. In this place, we have a pretty substantial cooldown reduction, and while that is helpful here, we are still very much in danger, since there's like 20 guys running at me. Now, I know for a fact that I can take on 20 guys at once. Pause, in-game. But getting it done without taking any damage is a little difficult. Thankfully, we only managed to take around 600 damage and move on to the Ruin Hunter. This girl's name is Dusky Ming. Oh yeah, that's going in my cringe compilation. During this fight, I made a mistake because I didn't know that the shield doing damage also healed the character, and I made that mistake again. Once we took down the machine, we went over to Cloud Retainer's Mountain and stood on a bonfire. This place is actually important in the challenge because this is where I will be in the future when I accidentally heal and need to lower my health again. Get used to it. The domain itself here was easy, since we were able to successfully perform the skip, and as for Mountain Shaper, we found the Amber all without taking any damage.
Lapis assassinated?
The Rite of Dissension? After finishing Act 1, we had a pretty comfortable trip getting up to AR 25. And by comfortable, I mean our duo has still survived, but I made 2 mistakes. If you were to ask me if those core Lapis were worth it at that time, I might have said yes. But as a man who has matured in the past 3 months, I can tell you, it was not. Once we hit AR 25, we went over to the cooking pot, made another mistake, and burned ourselves as well as the rocks with our secret weapon.
Cameron has revealed his secret weapon.
But this quest isn't just limited to burning some rocks. I usually don't show it in the other videos because it's really not a big deal, but in this challenge, it is a big deal. We have to fight Hilly Churls while lighting the fire, and since we did not have a shield for our Charlotte, things did not go well for her.
Come on, Flat.
And those things proceeded to get a lot worse.
Oh, my camera!
These battles were just a lot of running around, since we had to rely on Charlotte's tick damage to really do anything. I didn't want to use too much of our secret weapon here, because if she took even just a little bit of damage, we couldn't bring her past level 40, and I knew we would need her for later on. Just somehow, Charlotte was able to clear this and cling on to life with just 259 HP, while Amber finished cooking the rocks. That was one of the required elements done, and now there were only 2 left to worry about. Instead of heading over to the next part of the quest, I decided to go fight Aleph. I did this for 2 reasons. 1, because we need his drops to level Lisa, and 2, because he's no longer in the Ascension domain. For this encounter, I chose to keep Charlotte in the battle, despite her expiration date arriving soon. You may see this decision as dumb, or even brash, but I saw this as confidence. Because me and Aleph, we go way back, okay? I know this guy inside and out, so beating him without taking any damage was nothing new to me. Luckily, we got 2 drops from defeating him, then we continued Act 2. Our Charlotte is still 1 hit away from dying, and the first group of enemies in here are Electro Slimes. And just as a reminder, getting close to them does damage to us. The good thing about Charlotte, though, is that she's cryo, so she can create Superconduct, which not only does AoE damage, but also slows down the slimes from reaching us. And because of this, we were able to escape that mugging and move on. Next, our Noelle knocked the Geo Slime into the hole while tanking damage from the spider. Then we reached the next big death trap.
So many slimes.
Thanks to Noel's shield and the landmines, we were able to take down all of the slimes, but also make a mistake. Hey, this is the last time I made this mistake with Noel on this account, because this is when I learned that the initial hit does in fact heal us. At the end of the slime gauntlet were 2 electro slimes and a cryo slime, in which Charlotte took out the electro duo and Noel slowly chomped away at the cryo slime. Now all that's left in Act 2 is the treasure hoarders at the ballista, after this quick burning. And if you're wondering why I haven't just killed Charlotte similar to how I decided to kill Chi-Chi, it's because Charlotte has a lot more use to us than a child waving around a stick. However, all that effort was for naught, as Charlotte proceeded to expire. No! I thought that I would just thug this section out with Noelle, but after seeing her damage, I decided to go back to the lobby. Things were not looking great for us. We could only use these characters, and I couldn't level 2 of them. I chose to add Amber as one of our slots because we didn't need Pyro anymore, and we had an additional bow character on the team with Kale, so she could cover the archery demonstration. For her partner, I chose to add Barbara because she was the most expendable. We needed the bow from Kale, we needed the Electro from Lisa, and for the other 2 characters, they were both so low they couldn't really do anything. Barbara, on the other hand, hadn't taken any damage, so we could level her up to 40 and use her for this section. Barbara's role is similar to what Chi-Chi's was, since she can't use any of her abilities, so she's a normal attack bot. But since she does have ranged normal attacks, I felt a lot more comfortable using her. Thankfully, Barbara only managed to lose just about 3,000 HP, but more importantly, our secret weapon did not lose any, meaning Amber was still free to be leveled up and we were done with Act 2. Next on our to-do list was the Ascension domain. Even though this place is not as good as it once was, there is still a threat at large: the time limit. We are basically using 2 characters who cannot use their abilities, and I'll be blunt, both of their normal attacks weren't exactly doing the most damage. I failed 2 attempts of this and decided enough was enough. I was familiar with that one Albert Einstein quote, not that one, the other one. So I decided to go ahead and use Lisa for this. We brought Lisa up to level 44 and went back inside for round 3. I chose to use Lisa here because I knew that we would need her for later, but I felt confident in myself that we could get past this domain without her dying. And I placed my confidence correctly because she was able to do this on her first try, taking only around 600 damage. As a reward for completing this, we got some wishes, and seeing as how we were really down on our luck, this was the perfect opportunity for a new character. You knew it was gonna be a weapon the second I said that sentence. Our next quest isn't available until AR-28, so we've still got a lot left to do until then. First, we took down the Pyro Regisvine, and since I've spent 28 minutes on that boss before, I was very familiar with its moveset, so we managed to not get hit during this. My dodging skills would not carry over to the next boss though, because once we did the rematch, Lisa lost almost 6,000 HP from this one move. Yikes. After that battle, we went over to Kale's boss, and for the first fight, we did pretty well, without us even taking any damage. I did this attempt before the second Regisvine fight, that's why she has more health here. But I couldn't just settle with 2 drops. We needed more. The second fight did not go nearly as well as the first one. For starters, we lost even more health, leaving our Lisa essentially 1 hit. And to make things worse, we only got 1 drop from this. Next, we went back into the Spiral Abyss so we could obtain Zhang Ling, who we then leveled up to 15. The main duo we used for our grind up to 28 was Barbara and Noelle. Barbara was pretty low, so I just figured losing her was not really a big deal. And Noelle was just there to press E. I did make another mistake though, as I completely forgot that Xingqiu can heal with his swords. Once we finished Xingqiu's quest, we managed to make another wish. Okay, 4-star? Yes. Alright, character we don't have. Character we don't have, please. Yes! Yes! Perfect. Yunjin was a great addition to the team, especially since she was our Noelle replacement because we unfortunately lost her to fall damage. No! Yunjin showed me that the best element for this playthrough was actually Geo.
Go on.
In normal situations, Geo's reactions are pretty underwhelming. It just gives you a temporary shield that goes away after like 2 moves. But in a playthrough like this, those shields are a godsend, since protecting us from a single move that does even like 100 damage means a lot in this challenge. As long as there's an element on the enemy, we can get a shield up. Combine this with a character like Barbara, who only does elemental damage, and we've got a pretty reliable duo on our hands. After making our first mistake with Barbara, we finally reached AR-28 and activated the Anemo device with our Sucrose. Next up was round 2 on top of the platform. These guards are different from the treasure hoarders. While they don't have any ranged attacks like the crossbow users, they do have spears, which does have more range than the hoarders' melee attacks. We were still able to get through this with minimal damage done to us because of our Barbara Yunjin combination. Our next task was to infiltrate the Fatui backlines. In this quest, there are 5 Fatui agents to fight, but you don't have to battle any of them. If you can get over to this area, you can engage in stealth. However, there is one important thing to consider: this pyro sniper. He likes to walk around this area, and the paper is located right there. What we have to do is interact with the paper while he's in this spot. It can be pretty tricky to pull off, but I've done it plenty of times before. And if you get caught, all you have to do is teleport and try again. Unfortunately, our mission got compromised again, but I chose to fight the pyro sniper there in the moment because the rain would instantly destroy his fire shield. With him gone, we were now safe to teleport out and collect the paper without doing any more combat. Following the stealth mission was our performance to the flowers.
Get ready now. Rise up into my world. Renew your definition.
There's a lot of things that were absolutely horrifying with these enemies.
Number 1.
It's raining and they're cryo. And as we all know,
Cryo is always far more effective in the rain.
2, they like to move around a lot. 3, they do a ton of damage. And 4, they are extremely tanky for no reason. But I had a plan for this. There's a lake right next to the enemy spawn, and we do have a burst that can move these flowers away. Anemo Traveler Burst. Traveler being level 16 didn't really matter since we already had their burst. And because the 3 of them spawned together, we could use our tornado and bring them into the water to drown them, which would instantly kill them. It was a great idea, but sadly in practice, it did not work out well for us.
These flowers are jumping. They look really angry. Is it because you sang a song for Mondstadt?
Oh,
They don't
no, what?
understand your allele?
What? Oh my god! We were in a really bad state right now. Our only viable replacement for this was Xiangling. So after we leveled her up, we went over to some hilly trails to get energy for our burst and tried again. And our strategy still didn't work because our tornado did not go towards the water.
Round 3. Fight!
This time, we started with Xiangling Burst, then used Traveler Burst. So that way, in the event that we couldn't drown them, we would at least do some good damage. But this unfortunately led to our Traveler getting stuck and dying. But he did take out one of the flowers on his way out. So now, it was up to Xiangling. However, fate was on our side, because one of the flowers decided to do its turret move. We had Guobo available, which meant that he could remove its shield and stun the flower. And since that flower was stunned, we could now 1v1 the other one and knock him into the river. Once we did that, we hit the last flower into the river and won the battle. Our next obstacle, though, was a boss fight. Child. Normally, he's a bit of a pushover, but he is actually a serious threat in this challenge. On the FNAF scale, I'd give him a Withered Bonnie. We were losing a lot of characters in this run, and we didn't have too many left. This was made even worse for us since we lost Barbara here too. In the grand scheme of things though, this really wasn't too much of a loss for us. As for the fight, this was just Xiangling versus Child.
You're going nowhere.
In the first phase, we did pretty well. It was definitely slow, but we got the job done without taking any damage. But what I was mainly worried about was his second phase. Out of all of his 3 phases, this is the problem for me. He has 2 moves that can easily ruin our run: his dashes and his nuke. The dashes are fast, do good damage, and are pretty hard to dodge, while the nuke button can completely destroy health bars if you don't remove the mark. We took over 2k damage in this portion of the fight, but we were still able to move past this phase and move on to the final section. As I alluded to earlier, this phase isn't too bad for us. In all honesty, it's probably his weakest one. If you just play around the side and back, you can trick his AI into doing moves that are very reactable to dodge. We did this for the entire phase, and thankfully, this allowed us to only get hit once during this section and finish the fight. Next was the defense against Osile. For this part, the game does unfortunately reset our health back up to full, but since Barbara died, I felt that it was only right to not use her here. The other unlucky part about this was the fact that the Adeptal buffs do in fact heal you, and I'm pretty sure that you have to be healed at this part because the game does make you take damage from the water cannon. So while yes, we are getting healed, it wasn't from my control, so I chose to treat this section like the Abyss in that as long as we don't use a heal from our ability or food, I think it's fine. Once we finished, I brought my health back down to 4k where it was at the end of the child fight, and at 19 hours and 13 minutes, we finished Leeway, but we've still got a lot left to do in order to beat the game. To gain the remaining XP needed to start Leeway, I chose to do the Jade Chamber quest first. I felt that this was the correct choice for two reasons. The first being we have access to a Trao Shin He for both of the combat sections, so you best believe that I used her. And the second being, it gave us the opportunity to gain resources to level up our Kale. With our Kale now ascended, we began the Dainsliff quest. The first portion of this quest went pretty smoothly. We mainly just put Guoba down and swapped over to Kale to do some charged attack gameplay. However, once we reached the end, we encountered a glitch with the Hydro Abyss Mage. He was stuck down there, so we had to reset. Which was actually not a bad thing for us, because I remembered that we could use a third party member. So I chose to use our level 9 Sucrose. This team comp covered a lot of elements. We had Pyro damage, which is good against most elements, Dendro damage for the Hydro shields, and Animo for grouping up enemies, as well as serving as our answer to Pyro shields, since Pyro and Dendro don't really do anything against them. For the next fight, I chose to remove Kale since I felt that these two could get the job done, and I didn't want her to take any damage. Luckily, these two completed the hit and finished the first Dainsliff quest with Zhangling left at 399 HP. But we still had to do the second quest to start Inazuma. Unfortunately for us, we lost Zhangling in this domain because I got caught in the bubble, and since falling into the void damages everyone in the party, Zhangling had to pay the price for Sucrose's mistake.
I killed my teammate. I killed my teammate. Oh my god. Oh my god.
And to make things worse, we had to bring down a Hydro Abyss Herald all the way down to a third of its health with a level 9 Sucrose that would die in one hit. It was time to lock in. Thankfully, my multiple encounters with the Herald showed in this fight because we were able to bring the Herald down to a third of its health and leave this place. Now, we were down to 2. There's good news and bad news for this. The good news is that we could level up Kale a little more, and most of the remaining enemies in this quest are Hydro. The downside is that there are still a lot of enemies left in this quest, and our Sucrose is about to die. I chose to add Amber onto the team simply because of Baron Bunny. We really didn't have any more choices, so I felt that it was necessary to use her if we wanted any chance of passing this quest. The scariest section in this quest was coming up next though. In this part, there was a Ruin Hunter, a Cryo Mage, and a Hydro Mage, along with some Hilly Churls. Despite all of the prevalent dangers around us, we played this part pretty well. You see, there's a way to manipulate the Ruin Hunter AI. If you are standing on top of something, the Ruin Hunter will recognize that you are above your normal standing level, so they will proceed to fly in order to find and attack you. Normally when it flies, it's a very dangerous situation because they stay up there for a long time and their missiles do a lot of damage. But this is actually good for us because it activates the Ruin Hunter's weak spot. And since we have archers, we can easily snipe its critical point, stun it, and focus on the other enemies. This strategy worked wonders for us and allowed us to pass this section with minimal damage being done to our Kale. After Kale swiftly took down the next Hydro Herald, we were met with perfect timing because a new banner had just come around. Just not Bennett. Just not Bennett or a weapon, please. But now we have one last obstacle between us and Inazuma. This Hydro Herald and 2 Abyss Mages. Our decision to keep Kale and Sucrose safe paid off in spades here. Sucrose was able to infuse her swirl with Hydro to easily destroy the Pyro Shield, while Kale quickly broke the water shields with her bombs. We started Inazuma, but things weren't looking good for us. Our Kale continued to take damage from the treasure hoarders, leaving her with only 600 health. We completed the prologue, but at what cost? We had a Sucrose that was on death's bed, a level 46 Amber, a Lisa that I accidentally leveled, so she was banned, and a Kale that just died because I closed the game at the tournament stage, so when I loaded back in, a Ruin Hunter killed her. We had one last shot, one glimpse of hope to have a chance of completing this challenge. We had to get a 4-star character from this banner. This was our last chance of completing the run. We had to get a character. Yes, not Bennett, not Bennett, not Bennett. We were basically stuck with just our Amber, and there was no way we could beat all of Inazuma without healing Amber at least once. We only had 2 options here. Either break a rule and spend money to try and get more characters, or start over.
Outlanders, your journey ends here.
Yes, I really did this. This time, it was serious. No pop-up screen, no Oni Plays Best of compilation in the background. It was time to lean in. It was time for this wolf to step out of the shadow and into the sun. We were starting all over again with all of the additional rules put in place at the beginning. If you want to see me pick up to where I was when the last account ended, you can go to this timestamp. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail about every little thing all over again since this video is already very long, but I will hit the important stuff like this. I was extra careful to not swirl these slimes at the beginning because I remembered what happened last time, and since I knew for a fact that I wanted to keep Traveler alive for later, I chose to use my skills away from the slimes and finish them off with our sword, keeping our Traveler at full health. We then walked out of the forest to unlock our secret weapon, Amber.
So that's what it is! Your secret weapon,
Amber.
Once we unlocked wishes, we summoned on Noelle banner and got a Noelle and Xingqiu. Things were beginning to look up for us again. Luckily for Amber's temple, we left unscathed, and for the other 2 temples, we just used the trial characters. As for the wishes, we got 2 Betos on the Noelle banner and a Yo-Yo from the character banner. For this run, I chose to take a different approach for our characters. We were being way too liberal in our last playthrough, and by being liberal, I didn't mean we were complaining about it. I meant that I wasn't saving my resources, I was just giving them out to everyone, even if they weren't being used at that moment. This led to me being out of books and money for our characters. So for this run, I was going to become more conservative with our playstyle. And by conservative, I didn't mean we were going to be complaining about it, but rather value our resources more, instead of just throwing them out there onto characters that would die in 3 minutes. This is why I kept calling Amber our secret weapon.
That's why it's my secret weapon!
It wasn't a meme because we had Baron Bunny. You see, Baron Bunny is not good if you're trying to use it for damage. It is horrible, but it does work if you're trying to get an enemy's attention, sometimes. I didn't use Amber much earlier because I just had this idea that she would be the one who saved us in the later portions of this run, but it turns out that using her in the earlier portion was actually the solution all along. I felt like such an idiot. I should have been using Amber, but I didn't. I had to make things right in this playthrough. Basically, our entire strategy was to just throw out Baron Bunny and run away. Yes, that was it. Seriously.
Hi.
We threw out Baron Bunny, then used our aim shots. Eventually, I did grow some balls and added characters like Xingqiu and Kaya, and since we couldn't level them past 20, they would serve us well in the earlier portions of the game. We got some characters like Kaveh and Bennett, then suffered a pretty unfortunate event in the Shangling story quest. I tried to walk over the branch, but since the game just had to show me where the puzzle was, I couldn't time my jump and we fell off, hurting our current team.
Whoops.
Alright, get ready because I'm gonna start going fast now. Before we started Act 2, we wished again on banner, froze the eye with Xingqiu and Kaya. then entered the Fatui hideout. Mush, Diluc, mush! Then we froze the Ruin Guard and entered the final domain for Mondstadt. This time, I made sure to bring in Amber so we didn't have to worry about getting hit by the explosive barrel.
Smile, you son of a...
We finished the domain with Kaya taking about 90 damage, then we did the first floor of the Abyss and started Act 3. This time, we didn't have any problems at the gate, thanks to Freeze. But before we actually fought Dvalin, I decided to level up my Traveler to 40. I did this because I wanted him to have some levels for later on, and I knew for a fact that I was going to take some damage during the first phase, which I did. Once it came time for the ground phase, I chose to use Venti because I wanted to be able to one-phase him, and we thankfully did. We finished Mondstadt in nearly 8 hours, but we are in a much better position in this account than the previous one. Next was Leeway, in which we started at 10 hours. We also picked up Asara in the grind up to here, but I didn't have it recorded because, I'll be honest, I was beginning to run out of space. I know it sounds sus, but you're just gonna have to trust me on this. For the deer, we are still running the Kaya Xingqiu duo because Freeze is pretty broken in this playthrough. If they can't move, they can't hurt you. Freeze also helped us take down the Ruin Hunter without getting hit. To end it off, we managed to do the skip in Cloud Retainer's place, and for the Mountain Shaper, we found the correct Amber and finished Act 1. During our grind, I decided to give Kaya a break and brought out Kaveh, who had only 2k health left. He was very much a victim of burning. Now it was time for Act 2. On the way to the cooking pot, we obtained our free Lynette, then we swapped out Xingqiu for Amber. And I'll go ahead and show you guys what characters we have so far. No deaths yet, but Kaveh, Xingqiu, Kaya, and Amber are all pretty low. The level 1s haven't been used yet. The 3 Electro units also haven't been used yet because I want to save them for later. Then we have the Traveler and Bennett, who are both stuck at level 40. Back to the cooking pot. Kaveh was the DPS at this point because he actually does pretty good damage right now, and Amber is still low. Going into the teapot, I chose to swap out Amber with Bennett because I still wanted Baron Bunny in the future. We played this way more smarter than the last run. Everything was accounted for, even the spiders. I came up with a strategy here, which included running at the web, smacking it, and swapping to Kaveh's burst for the iframes. Every bit of damage counts in this run, and I was starting to take this more seriously. Bennett took some more damage from the slimes, but ultimately, we still finished in the green. As for the treasure hoarders, Bennett yet again took some heavy damage, but we did manage to end Act 2 without any fatalities. And as a reward, we got a Sucrose, which is still amazing for us. Yes, Sucrose! Yes. We then entered the Ascension domain, but ended it with our duo heavily damaged without a med kit. But more importantly, they were still alive. For completing this, we got 2 wishes. One gave us a Sucrose constellation, which is not as bad as it would seem, and we also got a 5-star.
Yo, a 5-star? Please be a character.
To begin Act 3, we still didn't have any deaths yet, but there were multiple characters who could hear the knocking. I had used Geo Traveler some since he would allow for Crystallize, and if you're thinking that I use the statue to heal, I'll have you know that it is set all the way down to the minimum amount and is turned off to prevent this sort of thing from happening. We then used our now level 40 Sucrose to activate the Animo device. As for the guards on the platform, we used the combo that I just mentioned earlier. Getting the Skyward Blade was actually kind of like a blessing in disguise, because it allowed us to use Geoburst more, giving us Crystallize, some more shields, which ultimately helps us minimize damage. We then did the stealth mission on our first go, and it was time for the Whopper Flowers. I changed our team comp to be that of Xiangling and Sucrose. I wasn't looking to drown the flowers this time, but rather just straight up nuke them. That was easy to accomplish because we had Sucrose Burst, 2 uses of her skill, Xiangling Burst, Woba, and the Rain to help with reactions. Needless to say, this plan went a lot better than the previous one because we only took 1000 damage here instead of losing 2 characters. Next up was Child, and I chose to swap Sucrose with Traveler because I figured we could use Crystallized Shields to help us in this fight. And it did, with Traveler still living at 500 HP and Xiangling standing tall with 8000. We finished Leeway at nearly 18 hours, then we leveled up Sucrose to 50 and Yo-Yo up to level 20. She didn't need to be built because she was literally just a Dendro applicator. The painter was back in business. But not for long though, because during the Dang quest, I completely forgot that Uruguay could heal, so that was another.
Whoops.
Make that another one.
Whoops.
To avoid more of that in the future, I chose to swap her out for Amber and Baron Bunny, which did unfortunately lead to our first death in the run. We honestly can't complain though, because she has done a lot for us in this journey. You were magnificent, Amber. I shall never forget you as long as I live. During Act 2, Sucrose took some damage, somehow, and we managed to get by the bubbles without taking any damage. Once we left, I chose to replace Amber with Sara because I wanted a bow character for the upcoming Ruin Hunter segment. The strategy we implemented last time did not work as well this time, but I decided to play this a lot slower by teleporting to reset the enemy's position. This didn't respawn enemies, but it did heal them back up, which was fine by me because everyone was close enough to each other so we could get some good AoE damage on them. That was the hard part finished, because for the heralds, we just used the previous strategy and we were done. I'll be honest, I didn't even record the Jade Chamber section because it was just the Shinha show like last time, but we did start Inazuma at 20 hours and 11 minutes. The prologue consisted of the tournament, which actually had a serious threat to our traveler because he could have died here. Wrong, she got hands. As for the other fights, Sucrose was our answer. Guoba allowed for easy safe pyro swirls, so we didn't have to worry about getting hit by small attacks. After 21 hours, we surpassed our previous account with only one fatality, but more importantly, we could finally reach Inazuma, the hardest part of the challenge with the biggest looming threat out there. The nation that I was the most afraid of for reasons I'll explain as they happen. To begin, we had the transport mission. My first nerve. There's a lot of enemies here, plus the Ronin is also extremely tanky. But we lucked out here, because this transport is essentially a large Baron Bunny. All of the enemies here did not care about us. They could not give two shits. So I made Barbara our main DPS, because she's in the club, plus we need to save our other characters. And since we have Guoba out, she can get some pretty easy vapes from Barbara.
Vape. Vape comes out the motherfucker.
Next was the prison, my second nerve. This place has groups of enemies in very small areas, and there's this one move that the large guards use that I am absolutely terrible at dodging. I was very surgical in my approach here. If I could single out a target, I did. I was not taking any chances in regards to this area. Thankfully, my caution was rewarded because we did not have any deaths here, but Sucrose and Zhangling were pretty close to it. I didn't record the Ayaka and Yoimiya quest because both of the combat sections have trial versions of the characters, so there's not much to say. I did have a mess up though. Whoops. It wasn't recorded, but it is in the notes. At 23 hours, it was time for the first fight against
The almighty Raiden Shogun.
The fight did reset our health, but we ended the battle with basically the same amount that we went in with.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Next was the archery demonstration, which we were able to use Sara for. The only thing is, we had to make sure that we did not get hit by the lightning.
God
Pressure getting to you?
Lastly was Sara's special men, in which we executed a near perfect swap to save our Barbara from taking damage. We will take that. Now, we were ready to start the hardest section in the game, Inazuma Act 3. The beginning is filled with the simple stuff. We took our time taking down the samurai and activated the pillars with our Sara. But I was prepared for the next part. I knew an Electro Biggie Churl would spawn in, so I chose to bring out Kaya to quickly destroy his shield and freeze him. This was risky since Kaya had less than 300 HP, but it did pay off for us. However, these weren't the areas I was concerned with. No. That would begin with the Delusion Factory. I had a plan for this area. The first step was leveling up Noelle to 50, then we watched Teppei die. After that, we entered the Delusion Factory, and the first thing we need to do when inside is not use our Barbara skill. God damn. Alright, for real now. There are a total of 11 enemies in this area. 3 of them are pyro snipers, so I knew I wanted to use Barbara for her hydro damage. There's 2 electro enemies, a witch and a hammer, 1 hydro gunner, and the rest are 2 animo boxers, 1 geo agent, and a water witch. The elements most effective in this area would be cryo, and since Kaya was still our only cryo character, I felt that we should use him here. but since he's such low health, I figured that we should bring in Noelle to use her shield so we can safely cover Kaya when he tries to use his cryo abilities. Once the cryo has been applied, we can freeze them with Barbara and hopefully just win. Let's see how this worked. And I messed up again. Our first target was the Anima Boxer. There was no point in going after any of the other two agents, because if we destroyed their shield, the Boxer could instantly restore it. So we took a slow approach towards the Boxer by just using Kaya's skills and Barbara's attacks. The next target was the Geo Agent. I chose to go after him because the Pyro Sniper only has attacks that go in a straight line, so they're pretty reactable to dodge. Also, Noelle's Claymores were effective in weakening his shield, so we were able to land some good damage on him after breaking it. Once Kaya took him down, it was on to the Pyro Sniper, where Barbara easily destroyed his shield and we got the job done. The next floor was even scarier though, because of the Electro Witch. She was the main threat because of this move. When she does this, the only way to stop her here is to break her shield. And if we don't have Kaya's skill up, then this run is basically over. I did accidentally attack her with Noelle when we had the shield up, so that was another mistake. For about half of her health, we corner trapped her, but after taking a moment to realize that I did in fact mess up, we gave her the opportunity to use the move I feared the most. Luckily, Noelle's shield was available for us to use, and it was just durable enough for us to tank the damage and eventually defeat the witch. We then took out the remaining enemies one by one until it came time for the final room. If you haven't been keeping track, we have 5 enemies left. The first is a group of 3, a Hydro Gunner, an Anima Boxer, and an Electro Hammer. The Hydro Gunner was the obvious priority, since he can heal the other agents, but we had to exercise a lot of caution when dealing with him. The Anima Boxer likes to hang around the agent, which meant that we couldn't just use Kaya's skill, because if we use an elemental attack on the Boxer during the block, he does the Vacuum Punch move, and we aren't guaranteed to be safe from that. So for this, I chose to slowly chip away at his health with Noelle's Claymore. Once we killed him, the other 2 agents weren't too big of a deal. But now, we had 2 enemies left. The Water Witch was the focus, since she did a lot more damage and had more health. Our free strategy did work though, as Barbara and Kaya continued to take down her health slowly but surely. With her defeated, it was smooth sailing when it came to beating the Pyro Sniper. The second scariest part of the game was finished. Next was the anti-Shogun training. We swapped out Kaya for Sucrose since the second part of this quest deals with groups of enemies and I wanted that AoE damage. Afterwards, we burned our Barbara to make up for the mistake earlier, then we went inside of the Tenryo Commission's HQ, where we were spared by being able to use a Trial Sara, praise be. But now, we had the scariest part of this entire challenge ahead of us, Senora. Putting this on the FNAF scale, we're looking at a Nightmare Freddy, folks. Yeah, this is the big time. I knew that what we had currently could just not compete. You can make arguments for literally every fight beforehand that getting hit was just a skill issue. But in this battle, taking damage is unavoidable, so we had to prepare. It was time to regroup. We leveled up Sara to 40, accepted our Kale that we got from the Abyss, and entered Sumeru to take on her boss and collect the mushrooms. We managed to not let Sara take any damage from the boss battles, then we leveled up Kale to 50. This was our strategy for Senora. Charged attack gameplay. These 2 would just keep using aim shots in the corner next to the weather things, while Noelle's shield would protect them. I even practiced this strategy on my main account because I knew how important this moment was. The first phase wasn't too bad. We made sure to keep our distance, and even though Kale and Sara got hit a couple of times, they didn't take too much damage. Whenever our weather bar got high, we would just use Noelle to tank it. Eventually, we forced her to retreat inside of the crystal, then we began the real problem phase, Pyro. He builds up extremely fast in this fight, and every time Senora moves, she leaves behind a trail that damages you when you walk over it. We had to be extremely careful in this situation. Aggravate was the best reaction we could make, and Sara's burst was our best source of damage. But after we used her ultimate, we didn't have any more pylons to break. We had nothing to stop the weather, so we had to use everything. Kale's skill, Sara's charge attacks, anything we could to damage her. And somehow, by just some miracle, we found a way to beat this without losing any of our characters.
Yes! You
Wrong. But how?
yourself.
That was,
That was really bad.
To end Inazuma, we had the final battle with
The almighty Raiden Shogun and the Muso no Hitotachi.
which was pretty underwhelming compared to what we just did, I'll be honest. We had our health reset at the beginning of the fight, which didn't matter too much because she hit us like maybe 4 times in total. The second phase is when she gets more dangerous.
You should kill yourself.
It's not too much of a challenge for us, especially when the game, unfortunately, automatically heals us. But I wasn't too upset with this. Senora was the real final boss of this nation. My biggest worry was gone, and my confidence was back. I knew that I could finish this challenge. Before entering the chasm, we burned our characters down to the health they had after the Senora fight. I chose to keep this team since we didn't necessarily need anyone in particular anymore. The main threat prior to the Dainsleif quest was this Geobishop. These enemies are tanky and do a lot of damage, but we managed to not fight him here because of this skip. If you jump over this box and hug the wall, you can mash F and you will interact with the diary that you have to read, all without ever getting the Geobishop's attention. Oh, the next problem was the duo Abyss Mages. Kale swiftly took down the Hydro one, but Sara did receive some damage while taking on the Pyro Mage. Once we made it to the Dainsleif quest, I decided to swap out our Sara for Lisa. I chose to do this because I wanted to save our Sara for later, since she's a bow character, and for now, I wanted to be able to use a character to tank damage if we needed that to happen. Plus, we had a Kale, so we could make aggravate reactions much easier than with a Sara, which did help us take down these enemies quickly. Kale was extremely helpful in this quest, mainly because she was our answer to the Hydro Herald and Electrolector. Our other 2 characters couldn't really do anything to them, so she had to put them on her back for some of this. For the Abyss Mage Gauntlet, we managed to not lose any characters, but our Lisa did take some damage, and Noelle was now on pack watch. We were finished with the chasm, and we were getting ready to go to Sumeru. My main strategy for Sumeru was basically what I was already doing throughout the chasm. I felt confident that Lisa could be our carry, because her attacks have long range and can easily react off of Kale's abilities. Plus, she'd also have Noelle's shield for that extra protection. We just had one more thing to go through before entering the Nation of Wisdom, the AR-35 domain. This place served as a cautionary sign, telling us that we were not ready.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
Okay.
Our strategy was working, and we weren't taking any damage, but at the same time, we also weren't dealing much damage. Lisa was our only real offense here, since the other 2 characters didn't have leveled gear. We did the final challenge, but failed. Our Lisa took a lot more damage than I thought, and sadly, we couldn't finish the domain. We just did not do enough damage, and it seemed like we were going to be stuck here. But then I remembered something. Just a couple of seconds ago, I said, we just had one more thing to go through.
Was the lie detector determined? That was a lie.
We could just go straight into Sumeru. There was literally nothing stopping us. For the previous Ascension domain, we had to do it, because if you don't, you will not be able to go to a higher adventure rank. You will still get the XP, but it will overflow until you pass that gate and progress normally. Leeway Act 3 is locked behind AR-28, so we had to do the AR-25 domain in order to get to 26 and 27. But Sumeru's story just requires you to be AR-35 and to have done the quest beforehand. So while we did start Sumeru, our journey just got a lot harder because of the unnecessary 6k damage Lisa took in the Ascension domain. But I was still confident. The first bit of combat was the Withering Zone. We took our time dealing with the fungi, but the real test were the branches. Whenever you hit them with a charged attack, they will shoot back, and that attack does a lot of damage. So we had to be extra careful with our dodging. Luckily we were, and we could cleanse this place. And if you notice the health change, that's because when you're in here, it reduces your total health by a percentage. We didn't heal any damage, we just kept the same percentage health we had prior. Next was the tree domain. We almost lost our Noelle here, but thankfully our defense artifacts came in clutch. Those were the only real enemies we had to fight here, so the rest of this place was pretty easy. Lastly, we had the mercenaries, which we took down without losing any HP. Act 2 was basically a break for us. I don't record Act 2 footage anymore because it's literally just walking around the city for 60 minutes, then fighting some treasure hoarders at the end. Act 3, however, started off a lot more interesting for us.
Oh, another 5-star. Whoa.
Another weapon! The first group of enemies here were 3 rounds of mercenaries. Luckily for us, none of the enemies here had any ranged attacks, so all we had to do was zone them out.
Stop it, big head! That's cheating! Big head!
I literally just kept running up and down the hill while constantly using Noelle's shield and Lisa's long-ass attacks to hit enemies. But the next group of enemies were far more problematic. The Wolf Clan. These enemies not only do damage over time, but they also hurt everyone. It's like that one kid in school who got in trouble, and now the whole class gets punished. It's not a class, it's a family. Or in this case, if Lisa got hit, everyone had to suffer. Things weren't as bad as they would seem though, because I had accounted for this. Since shields don't work against these enemies, I swapped out Noelle for Sucrose, who is still alive. The goal here was to keep these wolves together and spam them with everything we had. Lisa did get hit once during this, but thankfully, corrosion cannot kill your party members, so we survived with minimum damage being done to us. We did almost lose Kale though. Her head was about to be chomped right off. Another 4-star perfect. Another constellation. Act 4 was a very bumpy road in our journey. The hospital is filled with hilichurls, and eventually we have to fight a Geo-Lava Churl, which have some of the highest damaging moves from a non-boss enemy in the entire game. Noelle was the first to feel the wrath of the Lava Churl because its leap attack completely broke her shield and killed her. We didn't even get a chance to see her leave, she just disappeared. So now we were left with 2 characters that would basically die in one move without a shield. We continuously ran away from this monster, but it kept jumping after us and using its ranged attacks. But by just some miracle, Lisa managed to tank 1 hit from this monster and survive the fight. Now, we just have to activate the Dendro Pillars. But this is where Hoyoverse decided to be dead, because in order to activate 2 of them, we have to fight some enemies first.
You want to get to him, you gotta go through me.
Desperate to keep this dynamic duo alive for just a little bit longer, I leveled up Lynette to 40 and used her as our main DPS. I didn't want to level her beyond 40 because, to me, there was no real reason to. The first group of enemies weren't the problem though. The issue would be these mushrooms over here. There's a Geo Mushroom and a Flying Dendro 1-2. The Geo Mushroom is annoying because they just run at you. That is literally all they do. They run at you like a brain dead idiot. While the flying ones just fire projectiles that can be very difficult to dodge. I struggled a lot during this point and felt utter shock when our Lisa died. We managed to defeat the shrooms with Lynette, but we were in a really tight spot right now. I had planned on using Lisa for literally all of Sumeru. We needed a new damage dealer. I had to choose between Xinyan or Beidou, and for now, I chose to use Xinyan because I felt that Pyro was a much more needed element for us at the moment. After looking for Violet Grass, losing our Lynette, and obtaining another boss drop, we ascended our Xinyan, but could only bring her up to level 51. So I did the event that was going on and managed to get her up to 54. I was nervous about completing the rest of Sumeru, but I still felt that it was possible. Xinyan was our last hope. In order for us to have any chance at completing this run, she had to be the one to finish Sumeru. And this pyramid was her first test. And for her first test, she did great. She was basically the perfect character for this challenge. She did a lot of damage and had a shield. I was worried that we might get jumped at the top floor, but surprisingly, we completely nuked 2 of the mushrooms and only got hit once during this entire domain. We even managed to pull this skip off here, because if you go too far, a bunch of Geo Mushrooms spawn in, and after seeing what happened during the last fight with one of them, I felt it was best to avoid seeing them again. But now it was time for the hardest section in Sumeru, Act 5. The first combat section was not much to worry about. We did get an arrow in our butt, however we still came out of the fight without any troubles. The next battle was going to be against Fatui agents. 2 Pyro Snipers, 2 Electro Hammers, 1 Geo Agent, and 1 Pyro Agent. I still wanted to use Sucrose since every fight was going to involve 2 characters, but I felt that we should swap out Zhang Ling. We needed another element to help, since Pyro really wasn't going to work against any of them. So I decided that Cryo was our best course of action, and luckily, our Kaya is still alive from his last encounter in the Delusion Factory. And update, yeah, I forgot to burn him to around 200 HP, but let me just say right now, it doesn't matter because at this point in the game, game, he is dead to no matter what. The first duo was the Pyro Sniper and Geo Agent, but we were able to dispatch them pretty easily since we hit them with everything we had. Next was the Electro Hammer and Pyro Sniper. This was the main reason I brought Kaya out. As long as we have our shield up, Kaya can use his skill, and since Superconduct gives us a physical damage increase, Jin Yan could do even more damage with her attacks and eliminate them. Cryo doesn't really do much against the Pyro shields, however, but since they're easy to work with, we played this patiently and won the second round. The third round was a little tricky though because of the agent. He can do a lot of damage, and since he can also go invisible, it can be difficult to keep track of him when you're occupied with other enemies. Our Jin Yan did take some damage, but luckily for us, the agent got stuck behind the tree, and since the agent was also there, we got some easy swirls for Sucrose and was able to finish off the agent with Jin Yan, then freeze the hammer with Kaya. Our carry was still alive, which meant we had a chance. Flash forward 30 minutes of story, and we were ready to enter Scaramouche's factory. But I had this area scouted. I had a plan from the very beginning of how we were going to get around this. I doubt you remember since this video is already so long, but earlier I mentioned how I wanted Traveler to be leveled because I knew I was going to use him for later. Well, this is what I was saving him for. In this domain, there are a total of 11 enemies here. But what if I told you that out of those 11, we only had to fight 6? Well, here's the strategy I thought of. I knew I wanted Kaya in this domain because he would be helpful against half of the enemies we had to fight. And for Geo Traveler, you'll see what I'm going to use him for. The first target was the Hydro Gunner. Kaya could freeze him, Jin Yan could get a shield, and Traveler could give us even more shields, so we were pretty protected for this first fight. Next was another Electro Hammer, but you already know this was another easy battle. But behind him was the key to victory. In this domain, we have to activate 4 knobs, and beating him unlocks the first one. The next knob was behind a Crowd Gunner, and at first I tried to do the skip, but then I realized I have a Pyro character, so he wasn't much of an issue. The agent also couldn't really do much to us since Jin Yan's Claymore attacks kept stunning him. We activated the second device, then made our way over to number 3. There was a sniper here, so we knocked him off, but for some reason he didn't die, so we spawn camped him, and he was not alive for much longer. After the third pillar was when things started to get creative. Ever since the Barbara video, I always had this idea that it should be possible to activate this knob without having to fight the rest of the 5 enemies here. But I never had a character that was tall enough, or at least not until now, where the classic duo of Geo Traveler and Kaya teamed up once again to climb up these pipes and activate the 4th pillar. Now it was time for Scaramouche.
Come!
Unfortunately, the game does bring our health back up to full, but let's not kid ourselves here. We both know exactly how this would have went had our health not reset. But the real problem was the polluted area. This was also another reason why I brought Geo Traveler here. In this place, there are more wolves for us to fight, but since I didn't feel comfortable fighting them, I figured that Geo Traveler should be able to use his rocks and allow us to jump over the island without having to fight them. Luckily for us, this strategy worked, and we were able to skip about half of the enemies in this place. As for the rest of the enemies, I don't think we got hit a single time after that one swipe from the wolf. We were now finished with this area and done with Act 5, but we still had one last test in Sumeru after this quick burning. First up was a bonfire, which we lit successfully, and then unfortunately our health got reset again from the statue. I think this was just a special case though, because I turned the statue off so things like this couldn't happen. However, I think it only healed us because we are technically not in the normal open world, so this statue acts differently from how it's supposed to act in my world. Unfortunately, we had to go back to the statue again, which meant we had to go to the bonfire again. But finally, we could start the abandoned domain. The problem child of this area is the Cryo Herald, but since we have a Pyro character who gives us a shield, we were still looking good, and we finished Sumeru. But if we wanted to go to Fontaine, we still had to get past AR-35.
Lord have mercy, I'm about to bust.
At this point, I chose to go with Sucrose, Jinyan, and Kaya for the Ascension domain, since it seemed like they would have the best chance at killing the enemies the fastest. And they proved themselves to be right because they managed to complete this domain with Jinyan taking some damage along the way. As a reward for finishing this domain, we got official. Not from the wishes, of course, but thanks to the star glitter we got from all of the wishes we made up until this point. And as we drew closer to Fontaine, we began to slowly grind resources for our final two characters, Beto and Fischl. The best part about this was that these two shared the same boss, and since me and Aleph are pretty familiar with each other, getting his resources wasn't too difficult for us. However, this is where things started to go downhill for us. We still had to get more resources, and by doing that, we lost some characters. No! Everything was riding on Beto and Fischl's success for Fontaine. To get XP, we did some story quests like Cleese. It was a difficult decision to make, but I chose to use Beto here. I knew I wanted to level her up, so it was risky to have her out and take even just 1 point of damage, which would stop her from reaching level 70. Story quests were our best bet for safe XP because they give us trial characters to use, so having this Clee out here helped wonders for us. But we still had to get a lot of XP left, so I chose to do the safest option possible and be patient. I would log on only to do dailies because I couldn't risk Beto taking any form of damage. We did lose our Sucrose from electrocharged water and our Kale from an electro slime, but luckily, our Beto was able to reach level 70 and Fischl was now level 60. But we were still not in the best situation right now, as our Beto was now half health in her journey to get resources for Fischl. It wasn't going well for us, and there was some doubt going through my mind. Questions like, am I a fraud? Is this even possible? Can you do this? And the big one, would you lose? Fontaine, Act 1. Easy, just watering some plants with Xingqiu. Fontaine, Act 2. The first domain of the nation, in which we had gotten some health back at the beginning of the section. And since I didn't have any of the other story parts recorded, I was genuinely confused as to how both her and Xingqiu had recovered health. And honestly, I even thought that I might have cheated. Fischl hadn't taken any damage going into Fontaine, so I knew she was fine. I thought the game restored her HP because I did the math and figured, oh, it's at 80%. But then I looked at my previous footage and other people's footage and saw that the game does actually not reset your health here. I was very confused about this until I saw the Jonathan go through this healing ring and figured, oh wait, that's probably what it was. So here's 20 pools. Ultimately though, the added health didn't really matter, as for one, we didn't use Xingqiu, and two, Beto only took around 1k damage. But let's get into the real meat of this nation, the real final test. Before we start though, let's go ahead and burn Beto. The first group of enemies went down swiftly, and we didn't even lose a single bit of health, which was good because we were gonna need it for what was coming next. We made our way up the tower and came across our biggest threat yet. 2 rogues and a ruin guard. My plan was to take out the Animo rogue first, since he's very annoying and we could stun the ruin guard with Fischl's aim shots. The Hydro rogue isn't much of an issue because its attacks are just awful. Beto burst was our best and only real line of defense here, because we had C1, which gives us a shield whenever we use our burst. This area is extremely difficult to move around in. It's a small circle with objects placed along the side that can easily get in the way of us. The ruin guard was the biggest threat since its attacks took up so much space and did so much damage to us. We were trapped. We needed to kill the ruin guard, so we had to go after him because the Animo avatar would hit us, and it's just too much. Kaya died to the rockets, Fischl got caught on a treasure chest during the ruin guard spin move, and Beto got stuck on a box during the rockets. I lost. I couldn't beat it. The challenge was over. But I still wanted to try. I knew that in my heart of hearts, there had to be some way that this was possible with our team. So I got the band back together, put them back to the same health, and went for round 2. This was the real lock-in time. Kaya died quickly after being put in a position where we had to get hit by the rockets. Our strategy was basically to run around in circles and use Oz. As Oz does his thing, we use charge attacks on the guard and Animo Rogue in hopes to stun the guard during its main damaging moves. Our strategy was working. Just like my first relationship, we were taking it slow, but we were still getting some progress made, while taking some stray hits along the way. Eventually, we took down the Ruin Guard with both of our characters at around 2,000 HP. But we weren't done with this area yet. We still had to take down the Rogues. Yeah, they patched it out. You have to defeat all the enemies here now. We still played super safe with these two. Even with the Ruin Guard being defeated, I wasn't going to take any chances. So we just kept moving forward around the opposite ends of the room and shooting him in its head. Eventually, that got the job done and we were finished with this section. I was locked in for that entire fight. I did not talk even once during it. But there's still two things we have to do in Act 5. There's Farina's mechas, in which we used Xingqiu, and I did bring him back down to the health he should have been at earlier. We continue to play super safe against these enemies as we didn't even let them get close to us. It was as if we had put a restraining order on them. And now, we were at the final part of Fontaine, the Whale. Once again, we made it to another boss fight where the game resets our health, but at this point, it didn't matter. I basically said to myself that if Fischl and Xingqiu got hit, I would just consider them dead since they were already one shot, but I mean, who cares? We beat the Whale, and we were done with Fontaine. After 49 hours, 27 minutes, and 48 seconds, we did not beat Genshin Impact without healing. This is a very difficult challenge. Easily the hardest one we've done so far. Could I have maybe done this if I didn't set up the additional rules? Probably, but I didn't, so we're not gonna know the answer. I changed the rules to fit my need for a challenge, and I was met with that. I didn't win, but I did have a lot of fun doing this. Having to strategize with the limited characters and having to save them for later use was really fun and satisfying to pull off. I'm glad I didn't use 4 team members throughout the entire game, because it wouldn't have felt like a challenge. It would have just been a Genshin playthrough without using a healing character, and I didn't want that. I wanted something different and challenging, and well, I got that. So yeah, I enjoyed the challenge and I hope you enjoyed this video. This was the longest real video I've ever done, and if you want to see more dumb challenges like this, it would mean a lot if you liked and subscribed. See, look, the things glowed. And who knows, maybe I'll attempt this again in the future when more nations come out. It'll definitely be a lot more difficult, but next time, I know I'll be ready. Will I lose again?
Tell me why.